You're listening to Glass and Fire, Episode 0, Connect the Dots. So this podcast is being born in a crazy moment in everyone's lives, with this COVID-19 pandemic truly changing the way that we interact with people, with ourselves, with our family, and our environment. This pandemic has truly affected everyone across age, race, religion, wealth, social status. Even though we are all so far apart from each other, this pandemic has united us as a human race. And this got me thinking about this topic of human connection. More specifically, this question: what are some topics that all human beings can connect about? Is there a universal topic that everyone can talk about? And I want you to take a second and answer this question yourself. What do you think are the universal topics that are common to every single human being on this planet? So I asked a bunch of my friends what their thoughts were on this topic. So if I asked you this question, just know that I was actually gathering data for this podcast. And this data set is not accurate by any standard, but it's really just a way for me to see if other people thought the same or different about this question. And I personally thought that we would all have very similar responses, mine being centered around death, loneliness, and relationships. But to my surprise, their responses were a range of topics that were very different from what I thought, each adding on a different perspective and reasoning to this question. So I wanted to share some of these topics with y'all today, and maybe you can also compare what you thought about this question when I first asked it. So the most common topic was death, and this one was on my list as well. Death seems to be a fascinating topic for human beings as long as we've been a race, and I think it's a perspective that's very unique to human beings. But it just got me thinking about why death is such a common connecting topic for us. I mean, it's not like anybody has experienced it firsthand and can talk about their experience. So the real question is, what is it about death that makes it such an interesting topic to human beings, if it's something that we have never experienced? Is it the fact that it holds some sort of notion of the unknown? Is it interesting to think about something that is out of our control? Is it scary? Now, obviously, I don't have the answers to this question, but I think it's really interesting to think about what is the underlying reason that so many people consider the topic of death. Tying to this topic of death is this idea of the loss of a loved one and relationships, which were topics that some of my friends brought up in both a negative and a positive sense. Relationships seem to be a defining factor for human beings and how we tend to build up our identity, gain the experience and resources we need to mature, and overall thrive as a human being. But this is not a unique trait to humans, as we know that many animals form bonds and relationships to accomplish the same thing. In this way, can this be thought of as a universal topic for all living things? And what about the lack of relationships, the feeling of loneliness? I think this is one that a lot of people have experienced at one point or another in their life, and could be a connecting moment, even though loneliness is the exact opposite of human connection. Just some things to think about on this general topic of death and relationships, and if you had these topics in your list when you answered the question, I want you to think more deeply of where these answers came from. Now, don't get me wrong, not all of the answers were this negative. A lot of people resonated with a commonality on extremely positive topics, my favorites being the love of food, human expression and art, and childhood innocence. I thought this childhood innocence one was fascinating to think about. simply because I haven't thought about my childhood innocence in a way that can be a connecting point for all human beings. I thought it was something that was extremely unique to me, that no one else could really truly understand. But maybe it's that uniqueness that allows us to have these conversations around a topic like childhood innocence. I'm sure asking someone, what was your childhood experience like, would be a great diving board into a deep conversation that could go on for hours and hours and make you feel more connected with the person afterwards. So, for all you people who love to have those 2 a.m. deep conversations like I do, ask the person this question. What was your childhood like? Explain it to me. What's something that you remember super vividly from your childhood, and participate in their childhood? And I'm sure you're going to learn so much about them from listening to their response. One of my friends mentioned the denial of human rights as her connecting topic. And I feel like this has a deep connection with the current Black Lives Matter movement. It's really taken our society by storm and, in my opinion, has reached its strongest support yet, which I personally find exciting because I'm always interested in learning about people and their experiences, and to open up another group's voice is so important to the progression of our society. But I never thought of the denial of human rights as something that everyone can relate to. It seems like something that these oppressed groups can definitely relate to, but not all human beings. So when I asked this person why they felt this topic was a human connection, they explained that it was the idea that your life can be held in the hands of someone else that leaves us feeling powerless. Moreover, this idea that whether or not you experience a denial of human rights on a daily basis, there is an innate fear of having your life in the hands of someone else other than yourself. I believe that movements such as the Black Lives Matter movement and the #MeToo movement have their core values centered around this idea that every person's lives and their decisions should be held in the hands of themselves, not by failing societal structures that create systemic oppression, and not by the leaders of government. This topic in general is such a large one to dive into, as I think that there are so many perspectives as to how injustice, discrimination, and biases lie in our societal systems that it's difficult to tackle all of it in one podcast. My takeaway from this, connecting back to the original question, is that if you didn't think of this as your answer to that question, think about what it feels like to not have experienced or feared the experience of the denial of your human rights enough to connect with people on that commonality. Personally, one of the most interesting topics to me was how many people said that religion or lack of religion was a human connection. And I guess it was interesting to me because I don't agree with this connection. But more than half of my friends mentioned it. So if you thought about religion or lack of, I have some questions for you. Is it the concept of religion or not having one that connects us? And can you truly understand another person's religion? I mean, if you're an atheist who doesn't believe in a God, can you understand the life of someone who does believe in a God? Is it something that we can actually connect on? Truly? I think religion is a very tricky topic in America that has led to a lot of tension between people, but it really speaks to all the different perspectives that people come with. And I think it's one of the most extremely human traits that we have. But it's difficult for me to understand how every person can connect on religion. So I would love to hear from those of you who thought that religion was this human connecting topic, and what exactly about it made you think religion. The last one I wanted to mention is actually one that I didn't hear from anyone and actually didn't think of it myself at first. It's this common connection of language. Our ability to talk to each other could be argued to be one of the most important human connections of all. Language commonalities can be one of those first steps to connecting with someone. If you met someone else who spoke your language, you could easily communicate with them your thoughts, ideas, interests, your identity. We use our language to share opinions, converse about what's going on with the world, solve problems, and ask the questions that lead to answers. And that's kind of what this podcast is really about. Asking complex questions about society, morals, ethics, structures, things we say, things we do, to hopefully understand our diverse set of perspectives that make up the world. And we're not really looking for answers or an explanation, and I don't think I'm going to be providing one either. It's more about, why does it happen? And the why is something that we don't get to talk about a lot in society. I think that the media itself, they take the why out of it. They talk about what happened and the consequences, and people take this media and make their own opinions. But I'm interested in talking about these different opinions, because perspectives and the conclusions we come to bring profound change to society and make society different depending on what the public opinion is. All my friends had important things to add to this podcast, and by asking them questions and opening up a conversation, I felt that my opinions and my understanding expanded, and I felt like I got to understand them in a different way as well. So I hope that the episodes of this podcast inspire you to ask questions like these to your family and friends, and in turn, help you gain a new human connection.